What if everything you know about the history of exploration is wrong? A map from 1513 called the Piri Reis map shows parts of the world nobody was supposed to know back then. Not just America, but Antarctica, without ice. How could anyone have mapped that before it was covered in glaciers? Graham Hancock says this map proves there was a global civilization far older and more advanced than what textbooks admit. But if that's true, why is this map ignored or dismissed by experts? And why do some say there is a hidden effort to keep this knowledge secret? This isn't a wild conspiracy theory. It's a puzzle based on real documents and strange facts. Today we're going to examine the map closely, the claims surrounding it, and the heated debate it still sparks. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might change how you see history forever. Most people have never heard the name Piri Reis, so it helps to know who he was before looking at the sheet he created in 1513. Born in 1470 in Gelibolu, he grew up to become an Ottoman Turkish cartographer, admiral, navigator, and corsair. His maritime life began early, sailing with his uncle, a well-known corsair who later joined Ottoman naval service. Piri Reis followed the same path and eventually earned command of his own ship during the Ottoman-Venetian Wars. With that background, his famous map makes more sense. At first glance it looks ordinary, yet a closer look shows that the entire surface is covered with notes written in Ottoman Turkish using Arabic letters. These notes explain where he gathered his information and what different groups believed about distant coasts. He prepared this sheet for the court, and it later reached Sultan Selim I, which means every detail was created for readers at the highest level of the empire. There are a little more than 100 place names on the sheet, and about 30 longer messages. Most of them were written by a trained calligrapher, but one line is different. Scholars call this inscription 4, and many believe that Piri Reis wrote it himself. In that line he gives his full name and says he is the son of Haji Muhammad and the nephew of Kemal Reis. He also writes exactly when and where he finished the sheet. He says he drew it in the town of Gallipoli in the year 1513. Another message, placed above the part that shows South America, explains how he built the map. This is inscription 6. Here, he says that no one in his time had seen a map like this, and that he made it using about 20 charts and mappae mundi. These were medieval European world maps that mixed basic geography with older ideas about how the continents were arranged. They weren't used for sailing, but for showing a broad view of the known world. Some researchers think he may have relied on even more charts, since later notes hint at extra documents beyond the first 20. He also explains that he put everything on one scale, which shows he was compiling information rather than visiting the places himself. He then lists some of the old sources he trusted. He mentions 8 Jafarias and 1 Arabic map of Hind. Piri Reis says the 8 Jafarias came from the time of Alexander the Great, and that they show the part of the world people believed was inhabited during that time. He also names the newest charts he had. Still in inscription 6, he talks about 4 Portuguese maps that show the regions of Sind, Hind and Chin, with careful lines. These came from Iberian travel through the east. Then he mentions something even more rare. He says he used a chart from Columbus. In another long note, he explains how this chart reached him. He says that his uncle, Kemal Reis, captured a Spanish sailor near Valencia around 1501. That sailor said he had sailed 3 times with Columbus and carried a chart from those trips. That chart ended up with Piri Reis and became one of the most unusual pieces of information on the map, since the original Columbus chart does not survive anywhere else today. Around the sheet, his other notes share details about the lands, animals, and people from the sources he gathered. In the far southern area, he writes about very large snakes and says the land is hot and empty. He says the Portuguese sailors did not go ashore there because of the heat and danger. In inscription 9, he talks about white-haired animals, and oxen with 6 horns, and he says these details came from Portuguese charts. Coming from the notes on the 1513 sheet, the next place to look is how people in the 16th and 17th centuries talked about the ideas on that map. The first clues show up in Piri Reis's own writing. He made a large book called the Kitabi Bahriye, which means Book of the Sea. He worked on it between 1511 and 1521, then updated it and gave the new version to Sultan Suleiman in 1526. In the opening pages of that book, he talks about new lands, new seas, and the same stories that were written on the 1513 map. When he tells the story of Columbus finding the Americas, the wording matches what you see on the older sheet, almost line for line. He also adds more information about the seas and lands the Spanish and Portuguese were reaching. Even in this later book, he keeps saying that these discoveries fit with old charts that he thought came from the time of Alexander the Great. He talks about a new continent that the Spanish found on the west side of the ocean. All of this matches the ideas he used when he made the 1513 map. Even though Piri Reis's Atlantic maps did not become a fixed standard for the Ottoman Navy, the way the Iberian padroins did for Spain and Portugal, some of his ideas were still used later. According to some researchers, his work helped guide the Ottoman expedition led by Piri Reis the Elder when they sailed to the Canary Islands in 1586. His book also remained important in later studies. In the 17th century, a writer named Khatib Talebi used the Kitabi Bahriyeh as one of his main sources when he made his own geography book called the Muntahabi Bahriyeh. At the same time, European mapmakers were busy shaping their own charts. The Cantino Planisphere of 1502 already showed the coast of South America in a way that looks somewhat like the shape on the Piri Reis fragment, but the Cantino version had fewer land details. This difference shows how European charts were part of an active exchange. They moved between courts, merchants and sailors, gaining updates as new reports arrived. The Piri Reis sheet followed a different path. After being presented to Sultan Selim I in 1517, it seems to have been treated as a special archive item rather than a working chart for the Navy. Instead of entering a cycle of copying and circulation, it was stored within the palace and left untouched. That choice protected the map from wear and loss, but it also kept it out of sight for centuries. After centuries of being hidden away, the Piri Reis map was suddenly found again in 1929 inside the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. This happened while workers were turning the old Ottoman government centre into a museum. The piece they found is just the western third of a much larger world map. It was drawn on gazelle skin and measures about 87 centimetres by 63 centimetres. The man who found the map was Bey Halil Edhem, the Director General of the National Museums. He spotted the map tucked away in a forgotten bundle of papers in the palace archives. At the same time, a German professor named Gustav Adolf Deissmann was visiting. He was working on Greek and Latin manuscripts in the palace library and helping get money from the Rockefeller Foundation to save old manuscripts. Deissmann knew that Sultan Mehmed II had been interested in geography and suggested to Halil Edhem that they should look carefully for maps that might have been missed. That idea led to finding the Piri Reis map. After finding the map, Halil Edhem and Deissmann showed it to another German expert named Paul Kahler. Kahler knew Piri Reis's big book called the Kitabi Bahriyeh and quickly recognised the map as Piri Reis's work. What made the map even more important was the inscription mentioning a lost chart made by Christopher Columbus. This meant the map held clues to a chart that no longer exists anywhere else. Kahler presented his discovery in 1931 at an international conference in Leiden. This announcement surprised scholars because the map was made in 1513, which was earlier than many European maps that showed the Americas. The rediscovery of the map became a proud moment for Turkey. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the first president of the new Turkish Republic, took a special interest in the map. He started projects to publish and study it more. This helped make the Ait Fırtımay map a symbol of Turkey's rich history in science and sea travel. However, early reports in international newspapers mistakenly called it the Map of Christopher Columbus. To correct this, the Society for Turkish Historical Research published a clear article in the Illustrated London News in July 1932. They made sure people knew the map was made by Piri Reis and showed how advanced Ottoman map-making really was. Because the map is drawn on gazelle skin with ink and watercolours, it is very delicate. Experts say these natural materials are always changing and breaking down over time. The map must be kept away from too much heat, light and humidity. Because of this, it can only be shown to the public for short periods. After the map was rediscovered in 1929, Western scholars quickly began studying it during the 1930s. Professor Paul Kahler had introduced the map to to the international academic world in 1931, and 2 years later, he published a detailed study confirming that Piri Reis was the creator. Kayler's work also gave some of the first translations of the many notes on the map, which were mostly written in Ottoman Turkish. These notes explained how Piri Reis put together his map from many different sources. In the mid-1950s, interest in the map took a sharp turn. Researchers had spent decades comparing coastlines, checking sources, and debating whether the fragment relied on lost charts. Then a claim surfaced that pushed everything far beyond normal cartography. Captain Arlington H. Mallory, a civil engineer with a strong interest in old maps, argued that the long southern coast on the Piri Reis sheet was not a mistake, not a stretched version of South America, and not an artistic guess. He said it was Antarctica, shown as open land rather than the frozen continent we know today. He created his own grid system to reposition the map's points and claimed this made the map match modern charts better than anyone expected. The ideas about the Piri Reis map took another turn between the 1960s and the 1980s, when more scientific tests and reports came out. These focused mostly on the claim that the map showed Antarctica without ice. In 1966, Charles Hapgood published a book called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. In it, he included letters from cartographers who worked for the US Air Force Strategic Air Command at Westover Air Force Base. These cartographers studied the map on their own time and said the Piri Reis map, along with a map from 1531 by Oronce-Fine, seemed to come from very old source maps of Antarctica, when the continent was free of ice. Hapgood also shared letters that talked about data from a 1949 seismic survey done by Norwegian, British and Swedish teams in Queen Maud Land, Antarctica. One letter came from Lieutenant Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer, the commander of the US Air Force Strategic Air Command. Chiang Kai said that the lower part of the Piri Reis map matched very remarkably with the results from the seismic survey across the ice cap. Another letter from Captain Lorenzo Burrows agreed based on the same data. These letters from US military officials helped make the idea that the map was very accurate and based on ancient knowledge seem stronger. The 1990s through the 2010s saw the Piri Reis map become a public attraction that drew a lot of attention. The map was kept at the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, where it was carefully preserved because it was made on gazelle skin parchment. During this time, the map's reputation grew, and a lot of the attention came from interpretations that reached beyond standard academic work. Writers like Charles Hapgood had helped spread the story that the map showed evidence of an advanced lost civilization that had mapped Antarctica without ice thousands of years ago. At the same time, the map was part of exhibitions focused on showing how advanced Ottoman map makers were and how global exploration developed over time. One notable example was an international exhibit called Piri Reisten Katip Çelebiye, which showed many Ottoman maps. Because the original Piri Reis map was so delicate, museums often used high-quality copies called facsimiles for display. This way, visitors could still see the map's details without risking damage to the original. These efforts helped educate people and build appreciation for the history behind the map while keeping it safe for future generations. After the map gained attention through exhibitions and steady academic discussion, its story entered a new phase. This is where things rise again. Graham Hancock stepped in and pushed the Piri Reis map further into the spotlight with more force, scale and influence than anyone before him. Born in 1950 in Edinburgh, he studied sociology at Durham University, graduated in 1973, and went on to write for major British outlets like The Times and The Guardian. He later served as the East Africa correspondent for The Economist, reporting on real-world issues in harsh and complicated settings. So when someone with that background shifted his focus toward the Piri Reis map, people paid attention. His documentaries, interviews and books took a centuries-old fragment that had sat quietly in an archive and turned it into a spark for global debate. His Netflix series, Ancient Apocalypse, and several interviews made the map a central piece of his theory about a lost advanced civilization that lived during the last ice age. Hancock argues that the map shows knowledge far beyond what anyone expected from the 16th century. He believes that the map is evidence of a seafaring civilization that explored and mapped much of the world thousands of years before modern history, before a great global disaster about 12,000 years ago wiped them out. According to Hancock, the knowledge from this civilization survived in secret and eventually reached Piri Reis, who included it in his 1513 map. Hancock's argument depends heavily on earlier claims made by Charles Hapgood, who popularised the idea that the southern part of the map shows Antarctica without ice. To explain how Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral from the early 1500s, could have had access to this advanced ancient knowledge, Hancock tells a detailed story about how maps might have been preserved over the centuries. He points to the famous Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centres of learning in the ancient world, where he believes many important maps were copied and saved. According to Hancock, when the library was destroyed during the Roman period, some of these maps were rescued and carried to Constantinople, the Byzantine capital. Later, during the Crusades and the Ottoman conquest, these maps ended up in Ottoman hands. Hancock suggests that Piri Reis was able to use these ancient sources when he created his map. This story tries to explain how advanced geographical knowledge could survive despite many centuries and disasters, although it remains speculative since there is no direct evidence proving this chain of custody for the maps. Hancock's work has kept the Piri Reis map in front of a wide audience, especially people who enjoy big questions about early civilizations. In his view, it wasn't just an interesting artifact. It was a clue that suggested something important had been missed or ignored. Many experts have pushed back on his conclusions, but his influence made sure the map stayed in conversations about early exploration and unanswered questions from the past. So the big question is this: if the map sparked so much interest, what kind of theories came out of it? This theory focuses specifically on the idea that prehistoric maps show Antarctica's coastline as it looked before being covered by ice. Supporters of this theory argue that the Piri Reis map, along with some other early maps, preserves real knowledge from a time when Antarctica was ice-free. According to this view, these maps are not just guesses or symbolic drawings, but accurate records made from actual exploration or detailed information about the continent's shape and features. This idea became well known thanks to Charles Hapgood's 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood said the southern coastline on the Piri Reis map matches the real coast of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, as it would have looked without its thick ice sheet. Since modern science says Antarctica has been covered in ice for millions of years, Hapgood concluded that the original source maps must come from a time before the ice formed, or during a rare warm period after the last ice age. This means that an ancient civilization with advanced skills had to have made these maps. The technical side of this theory relies on how the maps were drawn. Hapgood and others, including Captain Arlington Mallory, believed the Piri Reis map was based on earlier maps that used advanced knowledge of geometry and Earth size. Mallory said the original source maps used spherical trigonometry, a way of measuring distances on a globe, and knew Earth's circumference within 50 miles. Hapgood added that the map was made using an equidistant projection, a method that keeps distances accurate. This was surprising because the visible map looks like a simple Portolan chart, which usually shows small coastal areas without advanced projection. Proponents claim that the chaotic elements on the map were corrected using a grid system based on Alexandria, or Cairo, showing the positions of places more accurately. This is especially clear in the Antarctic region, where Hapgood and Mallory said the map shows the coastlines of Queen Maud Land and the Palmer Peninsula. They believe the map purposely left out the Drake Passage, the stretch of ocean that separates South America from Antarctica. The Piri Reis map itself also has some notes that supporters say show knowledge of Antarctic conditions. One inscription mentions nights that last only 2 hours at the shortest and 22 hours at the longest. This matches the kind of daylight variation found in the far south near Antarctica, where summer days can be very long and winter nights very short. These clues add to the argument that the map reflects first-hand knowledge of the continent's environment. Some people find these technical and textual details convincing because they suggest the map's creators had access to real Antarctic geography long before modern explorers arrived. But if those clues really point to early knowledge of Antarctica, the next idea takes things in a very different direction. Some suggest that the Piri Reis map's accuracy does not come from humans alone, but from help given by non-human intelligences. This is part of what is called the ancient astronaut theory. According to this view, beings from other worlds visited Earth long ago and shared advanced knowledge with early humans. Supporters say these visitors taught ancient people how to make highly precise maps and gave them other skills like farming and building. One of the most well-known promoters of this idea was Erich von Däniken, who wrote Chariots of the Gods in 1968. He accepted the claim that the Piri Reis map shows Antarctica without ice, and used this as evidence that the map came from information collected by extraterrestrials. Von Däniken argued that such detailed mapping would have required technology beyond what humans had back then. He imagined that these space travelers surveyed the Earth from orbit, and then passed this information to early civilizations on the ground. The way this knowledge supposedly moved from these non-human beings to humans is often described as teaching or guiding what were seen as primitive ancestors. These visitors gave humans advanced tools and ideas, including the ability to map the planet with great precision. This idea fits with the belief that humans alone could not have developed such skills so early in history. Besides the Piri Reis map itself, other artifacts and claims are used to support this theory. Supporters often point to old carvings, unusual structures, and myths that seem to describe figures arriving from the sky. They argue that these stories hint at contact with advanced visitors rather than being simple legends. Some even say that certain alignments in ancient buildings show knowledge that people at the time should not have had. All of these pieces are used to build the idea that early societies were guided by someone far more advanced than them. Moving from the ideas about ancient visitors sharing knowledge, some believe there is a modern effort to hide or suppress evidence that could change our understanding of history. This theory says that powerful institutions, like universities and museums, work hard to protect the current story about how human civilization developed. People who support this idea often claim that the academic world is locked into a specific way of thinking and does not want to accept evidence that challenges it. According to this view, these institutions want to keep control over history because admitting new evidence would force them to rethink what they know. Some say academics reject new ideas not because the evidence is weak, but because they want to protect their own status and professional interests. There is a belief that these experts see themselves as the only true authorities, and they do not want others to question their knowledge. This attitude is sometimes called big archaeology, seen as an arrogant group that keeps outsiders from changing the accepted history. Supporters of this theory also argue that people who bring forward new or controversial ideas face active opposition. They say critics use harsh language to discredit these researchers and make it hard for them to get funding or publish their work. One example often brought up is the case of the archaeologist Jacques Cinquemas. Some supporters claim he was treated unfairly because of discoveries they think connect to ideas like the ones linked to the Piri Reis map, even though he continued working for many years after. When critics question claims about the map or similar topics, supporters of suppression say those challenges are part of a larger effort to silence anything that goes against accepted history. They sometimes argue that critics use labels like racist or fraudulent to shut down debate, even if those labels do not actually apply. Another part of this belief is the idea that major media outlets hold back anything that does not fit mainstream opinions. When shows like Ancient, Apocalypse drew attention to alternative ideas, including the Piri Reis map, some professional archaeologists wrote letters asking for the shows to be placed in the science fiction category, rather than presented as factual. Supporters of suppression see this as an attempt to keep the public from hearing viewpoints that might support the map's more unusual interpretations. The fact that some streaming services continue promoting content that challenges standard archaeology strengthens this feeling that certain information about the map and similar topics is being held back. Some people also believe that researchers who try to publish work supporting these kinds of ideas, including those tied to the Piri Reis map, struggle to get accepted in major journals. This creates the impression that the academic system blocks anything that could change the usual story of early exploration. For many supporters, this fits into a bigger picture that includes government secrecy and other unexplained topics, building the sense that the truth behind maps like the Piri Reis sheet is being kept out of reach. To connect to the Piri Reis story, I want to share two brief examples that people often use to argue that ancient maps or artifacts could rewrite history. The Vinland map is one of those fascinating artifacts that captures the imagination, much like the Piri Reis map. It's said to be a medieval map that shows a part of North America, specifically a region called Vinland, well before Columbus's famous voyage in 1492. If true, this would mean that Europeans had knowledge of the continent centuries earlier than commonly believed. The map depicts the coastline of Greenland and parts of what could be Newfoundland, using medieval cartographic styles mixed with surprising details. It was first revealed in the 1950s and immediately sparked curiosity because it seemed to challenge established timelines of exploration. The Antikythera mechanism is an incredible ancient device that has amazed historians and scientists since its discovery. Found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in the early 20th century, this intricate machine is often described as the world's first analog computer. What makes it so remarkable is the level of complexity in its gears and mechanisms, which allowed it to track celestial movements like the phases of the moon, eclipses, and even the positions of the planets. For a long time, many believed such advanced technology didn't exist in the ancient world, especially not around 2,000 years ago, when the device is thought to have been built. The Antikythera mechanism challenges that idea, showing that ancient Greeks had a much deeper understanding of astronomy and mechanical engineering than previously realized. It's like uncovering a hidden chapter of technological history, one that reveals ancient scientists were capable of creating machines that could perform highly precise calculations. The Antikythera mechanism, much like the Piri Reis map, challenges common assumptions about ancient knowledge and technology, while the map reveals an advanced understanding of geography long before it was officially documented. The mechanism demonstrates mechanical sophistication thought impossible for its time. So before getting caught up in the mystery, let's slow down and check out the real world behind the map's creation. Let's talk about how map making actually worked in the Ottoman world during the early 1500s. Once you look at that part, a lot of things that seem strange start to feel pretty normal. Piri Reis wrote notes on the map, saying he copied from older charts and books. Those notes were translated by scholars who pointed out that he openly listed what he used. That alone tells us he worked like many cartographers of his time. They combined pieces from different pilot charts, travel reports, and coastal guides. Sailors shared information from their journeys, and mapmakers patched it all together. This was common across the Mediterranean. Ottoman cartography had strong ties to European and Arabic traditions. Port-land charts were especially important. These were sailing maps based on compass directions and distances measured by experience at sea. When someone mixed a Port-land chart with a Ptolemaic-style world map or a Portuguese exploration map, the different shapes and scales often produced coastlines that looked stretched or tilted. That was not a sign of hidden knowledge. It was just the result of stacking sources that did not fit together perfectly. Piri's own list of sources included the charts of Columbus, several Arabic works, and Portuguese materials. Historians who studied these notes say this matches what Ottoman navigators normally did. They gathered information wherever they could find it. Nothing in that list stands out as unusual. This is why the strange shapes on the Piri Reis map make sense when you put them back into their original setting. They are the result of mixing different projections, different scales, and different traditions. That is what a typical 16th century compilation map looked like. That moves us from old maps to how people today use evidence. I want to look at how some modern writers pick their sources and why that matters. Graham Hancock wrote Fingerprints of the Gods and other books that mix archaeology, myths, and bold claims. Critics say he often leans on pieces that fit his idea and ignores the rest. It is argued that selective citation can make a weak chain of evidence look stronger than it is. There is a simple rule in history and archaeology. If you make a big claim, you show clear, primary evidence and methods that others can check. That means dated artifacts, published lab results, or archival documents. When a claim rests mostly on oral stories, ambiguous finds, or secondary accounts, it is harder to test. Scholars trained in archives and fieldwork ask for reproducible proof. Psychology helps explain why selective use of sources happens. Daniel Kahneman wrote about cognitive biases that make people favour information that fits what they already think. That is confirmation bias. It is a normal human habit. Smart people do it too. The problem comes when confirmation bias drives which facts get quoted in a book or lecture. Source problems show up in small ways. A speaker might use a traveller's eyewitness report but skip the official log that contradicts it. Or they might cite a newspaper report without checking the original archive. That kind of archival work often changes the story. Hancock and others also use pattern matching. They point to similarities between myths or map features and then suggest a deep link. Pattern matching can highlight interesting hints. It does not replace direct evidence. Peer-reviewed research looks for tests that can confirm or refute a pattern. Now, not every outsider claim is incorrect. New ideas play an important role. However, history and science require careful sourcing. When a book suggests major revisions of the past, the argument must be supported by clear, testable evidence and complete chains of custody for artifacts. This approach is what lends credibility to claims in the eyes of professional historians and archaeologists. We have Piri Reis listing his sources. We have early Ottoman and European references. We have the rediscovery in the 20th century and the notes from curators and researchers who handled the fragment. These records never try to solve a mystery. They only describe what someone saw, measured, or copied. They show a map built from many hands and many older charts, and they show how it moved through archives until people studied it in modern labs. The fringe theories do something very different. They stretch the map into much larger ideas. Some argue for an old global culture. Others say ancient people had access to lands that later froze. Some point to outside help from non-human intelligence. Others think groups today hide evidence. Each theory tries to show how the map fits a bigger pattern. The arguments often connect distant clues, treat unusual shapes as signs of greater skill, or build on stories that feel older than the written record. The critiques focus on methods and context. Researchers look at how maps were made in the 16th century. They explain how mixed sources create uneven coastlines. They use glaciology to show what coastlines should look like in different time periods. They examine copying errors and projection choices. They check how modern writers use their sources and where the gaps appear. Their main point is that known historical practices and scientific checks can usually explain the map without adding anything extra. Each group is talking about the same object, but for different reasons. The original records show how the map was made. The fringe ideas try to explain what the map could mean. The critiques test how strong those explanations are when you compare them with established methods. So, which take do you think really cracks the mystery of the map, and what surprising secrets could still be waiting to be uncovered?